The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bitten by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. Dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Hey, it's that time again. It's time for the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is André, your podcast host. Big thanks to Uka the Mock for our theme song, Superpowers. And big thanks to you, gentle listener, for tuning in once again to the show. Today, I talk with Peter Snejbjerg. I looked it up to make sure I pronounced it correctly. Pretty sure I did. I apologize if I didn't, but I'm pretty sure it's right. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But I talked with Peter Snejbjerg, who is a Danish comic book artist, creator, doing some amazing work out there. Has worked on a lot of stuff for Vertigo, Books of Magic, Animal Man in an issue. Quite a few projects, The Dreaming as well. And yeah, created some really cool... I love his work. It's just very... I want to say this in a way that doesn't, shoehorn an artist, because he certainly doesn't. He's very broad. The work he makes is excellent. But there's a time and a place in everybody's life where they're reading comics a lot. Usually it's when you're younger, a teenager, younger kid. But usually when the sweet spot, I think, is when you're between child and adult. So somewhere in the teenagedom, when you're discovering these books and they're reaching out to you, touching your soul in some way, beyond the regular thing, the regular dispensable amount of reading. So his work very much reminds me of that period for me. There's a certain style that was happening in a lot of those Vertigo books. Part of it was informed by the people that were coming into it and doing the cool work, he being one of them. And Peter's work really hits that sweet spot for nostalgia in my head from that certain era of comics. So it was really, really cool to chat with him. He's a great guy. Great story, and worked with some very cool creators and on some very neat projects. And, getting insight in the comic world of Europe and other areas, Denmark, is very cool. I'd like to talk to more people involved with, manga, because I haven't done much of that, but that world would be interesting to learn about as well. So, Junjo Ito, if you're listening, give me a call. But Peter was a great guest, and I was very happy to have him on, and big thank you, Peter, for being on the show. Much appreciated. And Davin, of course, our friend of the show, who helped make it happen. Thanks, Davin, for all the work you do as well. Speaking of Davin, be sure to check out the show we do together, X-Rated, the X-Men Anime Review Show. We're currently working our way through X-Men Evolution. It's a fun little ride. And, you can join in on that. Davin actually pointed out one time that I use the word little a lot in these shows. And he wonders if it could be diminishing to the work of the people I have in the show. I hope not. It's just some affectation that has worked its way into my dialogue. It's never intended to be that way if it comes off that way. But I will use it now since it's something I'm a part of. It's a fun little show. So thank you, Davin, for being an avid listener, a friend of the show, of the podcast, and co-host. Big thanks. Things going on. I just finally got around to watching the Oscars. By the time this airs, it would have been a month and a half ago, that you probably saw the Oscars. So I was very pleased to see recognition go towards the movie Flow, which was, I think, Croatian movie, animated film about animals coming together. It's a beautiful film. It's one of my top 10. I did a top 10 list for 2024. It was on it. It's very... very touching film about community, about togetherness, about banding together of different animals during a flood. It's basically a silent film. I mean, there's lots of sound, but the creatures don't speak. And it's a gorgeous, beautiful film, and a great representation of the type of work that's being made by people in other countries. So don't just limit your film-going experience to that which is in your particular region. Branch out and go see some stuff that other people are doing, because they are doing some innovative and amazing work. And of course, Nora, the Sean Baker film, went on to win a lot of the major awards, which I haven't seen it yet, but it's on the list. It'll be coming soon. I was hoping The Substance to pick up a few more. I really, really love that movie. But Hollywood doesn't tend to respect horror movies, and I feel like that trend just has continued. So whether I call that a horror movie, I don't know. It seems like it in certain elements for sure. definitely a body horror movie, but that doesn't necessarily equate to like horror in the scary way. But yeah, no, great movies, great films, and great Oscars this year. So I'm sure you've probably already seen it, but if you haven't, check out a lot of the movies. I mean, check out all the movies that were nominated. I know people tend to diminish the Oscars as being this kind of bloated, self-congratulatory event for actors and writers and people involved in Hollywood. And I can see that. I don't think they're wrong 100%, but I do think it is a celebration of an art form that kind of unites all of us. Everybody likes movies. Almost everybody. That's not fair. Not everybody likes movies, but the mass majority of us like movies. So the one thing that connects us all is sitting in a movie theater, eating some popcorn and laughing or gasping or crying or whatever we do while we're watching the movie we're watching. And it's nice to celebrate that. This is one of the few art forms that seems to unite us, much like music. So go check out those movies. And check out my conversation right now with Peter Snejbjerg.
Here we go.
Hey.
Now I look like me. I didn't realize I didn't have them on until I saw myself in the little picture, and I realized, shit, I don't have my glasses on.
Are you you need them for everything? Are you like me, or do you?
Nah, I just need them unless I'm close to the screen. I just
Oh, right on. And you are calling in from Denmark, I assume?
Yes.
Are you in Copenhagen or another area?
Yeah, I'm in Copenhagen. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Well, technically, it's but I'm for all intents and purposes, I'm in Copenhagen. Yeah.
Oh, nice. I have a friend that lives there as well. I haven't been over to visit him yet, but I really would like to someday. It sounds like a beautiful place.
It is. It's nice. It's a very quiet place. I mean, when compared with most, American cities.
Well, I'm actually in Canada in a pretty rural part of it, so I'm very familiar with the quiet, and I kind of like it that way. So,
okay.
Yeah, I'm in Nova Scotia, just on the coast there, the East Coast.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah,
I know that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've never been up there. Yeah. I'd like to visit someday. It's I'm actually more of a. I mean, in my heart, I'm more of a country boy than a city boy.
Yeah, I feel like we all have that conversation with ourselves at some point, or at least that realization where you're like, when you're younger and you're like, oh yeah, living in the city and blah blah blah, but then you kind of get to a point in your life where you're like, no, I really like the peace and the quiet, and you can always go to a city if you want to go do that, but it's nice to come home.
Yeah. It comes up more and more in conversation as you get older. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. My friend that I went to school with, he's a professor, I think, at the university there. So every time he comes home about once a year, and we get to catch up, and in the summer usually. But I've been meaning to. Yeah, he's an environmental engineer, so I think he teaches that as a professor there. So
cool.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. It sounds like a cool job, and it sounds like the way he describes life there. It sounds lovely. Like it just seems,
It's a nice. Yeah, if you I mean, maybe it's not the most, but it's a really nice place to live. It's a nice place to raise kids. It's a good city to live in.
Yeah. His partner's from there too, so I think he met her when he was there, and it seems like he's built quite a life for himself. He's been out there quite a while now. So
yeah.
Beautiful. So are you from that area originally, or some other part of?
No, I'm from the country, a small place called Silkeborg, which is also really beautiful, scenic area in India, in another part of the country. But I've been living in Copenhagen since forever. I mean, Denmark is a small country, so if you want to, the comic scene is all in one place. I mean, there's anything that there's only one of, it will be in Copenhagen. So it's if in my line of work, it's where to be.
What is the comic scene like in Copenhagen? Like, is there a lot of creators in there?
Yeah, it's lively, but of course, since it's a small country, it's difficult for people to make it. I mean, there are very few who can make a living doing comics. But we have a pretty enthusiastic scene, I think we can say. I mean, there's a lot of people doing graphic novels and stuff like that, and yeah, it's interesting. It's a good time to be a reader. Maybe a bit tough to be the creator these days, but I guess that's the same all over. There's a lot of really good stuff coming out.
It seems like it's, like with the internet, I guess it's a global market so much now. It's not doesn't seem quite as important as to where you are. I know
No.
quite a few creators have actually, like, from Canadian creators that work for the big ones
Yeah.
have moved to my area, which is a pretty remote rural area, part of the country. Um, but just because, the cost of living is so cheap and they can do what they can draw, they can write anywhere. So
Yeah, and I was just talking to some friends of mine the other day about how, I mean, because the weather, with the way the climate is changing now, the weather I mean, Denmark has always been a pretty miserable place in winter, but now it's
mhm.
just even worse because the temperatures tend to not get under the freezing point, so we
Mm.
just get a lot of rain all the time. And January and February are just like, it's really, really, really not very charming. So I
Yeah.
was just thinking about whether, trying to maybe next year to make a plan to just, go somewhere warmer and sit and work for a couple of months if I can
Mm.
go south somewhere, if I can figure it out somehow.
Yeah. Well, when did you first get into comics? Like, where did you discover those?
I've always been into comics. I think
Yeah.
I mean European comics, of course, and mostly when I was growing up. But I did also read a lot of the Karl Barks Donald Duck stories. Those
Hmm.
were a big favorite of mine when
Oh,
I was.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I guess those are
So
probably translated to a lot of countries, I assume. Like those,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
they were super popular over here.
yeah.
So that was a lot of my comics upbringing I got from that.
Mm.
And then of course a lot of European albums were being translated. And then when I was a teenager, I sort of discovered American comics. There was heavy metal was coming out at that
Mm.
time, and it introduced me to a lot of stuff I didn't even know existed before then. Also, some of the French stuff that I couldn't read because I don't read French, but suddenly I could read it in English translations.
Mm.
So the 80s were really also a really good time to be a comic book reader. There was just so much. Also because in Denmark there was a ton of stuff coming out that had been produced over many years, but we were only getting them translated at that point. So there was all this
Oh,
great stuff. And then of course along came Frank Miller and all that stuff that was like that a huge kick in the inspiration. And I guess that's when I started to I'd always been drawing comics since I
mhm.
was a kid, but that's when I started to it sort of became more of a I don't think I ever really thought of it as a viable uh, 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 career. That
Mm.
that that concept didn't exist to me at all. But I just started really obsessing about it and making more and more comics, and then it's just sort of grew and grew and grew.
Were you making, like, you creating your own, writing your own stories, creating your own thing, or are you sort of just aping what
Yeah, and
you
with
were seeing?
friends, just fancy stuff and things like that, like
Yeah,
most people start out doing, I guess.
that's cool. What's like I'm unfamiliar with, like, what I mean. I'm aware of a significant amount of European comics, but like, what were the ones that you would have found as a kid and been reading? I mean, I assume with the French, you're referring to Tintin and stuff like that. I guess those are
Yeah,
Belgian, but
Tintin was really big with me.
mhm.
I mean, I can see that a lot of the stuff I did when I was like 7, 8 years old, I can see there's some concepts I can see that just coming from Tintin. That iconic rocket that he drew, that
Mhm.
was I didn't know that at the time, of course, but it was like more or less based on the designs that the V2 rocket had and stuff like that. But that
Right, yeah,
stuff, I just drew that so many times. That was really that really made an impression.
yeah. It's amazing how much those stories still resonate, and like how, like, those. I think Tintin just entered the public domain, if I recall correctly, because of, the time has lapsed. Maybe it's different per country, but I'm pretty sure in Canada it is now.
Yeah, I can't really remember how it is. It's always been complicated, I think.
Mm.
But they still have, yeah, they still have and also the Bach stuff. I still reread some of that stuff from time to time, and it still has. I mean, it's just so good comics. It's just so lively, and
Mm.
and even if some of the concepts are maybe hugely dated now, it still resonates. It just has this. I don't know. It's just he is really. I mean, if those two comics, I would still put in the top 10 of all great comics of all times, I think.
Wow, that's high praise. And I would agree. I mean, it's funny how, when you have to take into account the things that would make that list, not even just what matters to you, but like what, as a, you know, artistically is rewarding, as a reader is rewarding, what was, like, what has reached the most people.
Hmm.
I had a similar discussion with somebody the other day just about independent comics and sort of like what ones that had far-reaching ones would you like hold up in such high regard? And this came in. We were talking about it because I was in a local store that just sells old stuff, and they had all these Bone toys from Jeff Smith's Bone
Oh
run,
yeah, yeah.
which is, in my opinion, one of my like very formative for me growing up. Like, but also one kind of version of a comic that not a lot of people think about because it kind of got like Scholastic took it and sort of made all those editions and kind of did so many kids things. But when I was first a kid, it was just a cartoon book coming out by Jeff Smith. It was such a mind blowing opening experience to me about like these fun adventure books that didn't have a superhero in them, but were just so relative and relatable.
I think he's Karl Barks has to have been an inspiration for him on those as well. I mean, they have so much of that in them.
Oh yes, yeah. I think Pogo was too a big influence for him as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Which is one too. But yeah, like all those sort of adventure books. And the Carl, the Banks, all those DuckTales books and all that stuff were such fun. And as a kid, it just like, I don't know, it captures something in you that sort of sticks all the way through. That's awesome. Well,
and then of course I discovered the works of Will Eisner about the same time that I was discovering heavy metal and stuff like that. There were some Spirit reprints coming out that were just, I mean, that's also one of those comics that's just essential. I think it's like it has so much. He just had this inventiveness to it that it's still. I mean, it was kind of hit and miss because it was obviously produced in a very different. I mean, this was more like it was a weekly installment in newspapers, so it was done under a lot of pressure, and he had a lot of assistants working, and sometimes you can see that sometimes it's a little off and whatever, but there was just so much. There's so much energy and so much fun in the best of them, and it has this thing which I think also the others have, which is that it's pure comics. It's the form of storytelling that only works as comics. Yeah, you can't imagine it in another medium. Yeah. The same with the Frank Miller stuff. It's just so organic and lively and
I was the most eye-opening for me about Miller was when I read one of his scripts for one of his books. Like they had the script in the back of like I think it might have been one of the Dark Knight Returns or something. And I remember it reads like a novel. Like he doesn't write it like it's like a movie script, like most scripts that I've seen for comics go. Which means that there's some like it honestly the story and the way that he writes it down is almost in a novel way. But I couldn't imagine, you know what I mean? Like it's a fine read, but I couldn't imagine enjoying it on the same level. Like his art really brings the magic and really opens it up. So like when you say that it couldn't be in another form, when you do see it in one, even because it kind of part of its original thing was, it's still like it's missing something, and that artwork is what did it.
And it's interesting with Miller because. I mean, I love the stuff he did with Mazzucchelli. That Daredevil stuff and the Batman Year One, obviously. I mean, but I think that's actually there's very little that Miller has done with other artists, and it's not. He worked with some great artists as a writer, but it just never really clicked that way that it did with Mazzucchelli. Maybe because Mazzucchelli, I could imagine that he probably just took it and ran with it. I'm sure that it would be interesting seeing those scripts. I've never heard that actually. That would be interesting to see that.
When I was young, I remember I think I came across those Daredevil books or whatever, or even Batman Year One, and I remember thinking like, oh man, Miller's, because as a kid you don't put into like he's just writing, not drawing. Like you just think that he's the one that does everything because everything else you've seen he did everything. So I remember even looking at like the art for those Year One goes and thinking like, man, his style has really changed from when he did these to now, and not putting together that it was a separate, it's like a stark difference. I mean, there's still some things that are kind of connective, and I can see that, but definitely not in any major way. No, but it's interesting that the spirit resonated with you because like I'm assuming that it's more the visual type of storytelling because at that point, like when you would have discovered that, I assume would have been like the 80s, 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
So
late 80s.
Yeah, so like there's so much that came after it, and it's almost like doing a history lesson by reading the spirit now because it's like these are the kind of the first archetype superhero books.
Yeah, but it still has that. I don't know. I mean, I think it still has that. It still lives in a way when you're reading it as a comic. I mean, it has that in the best of the stories, it has that smooth integration of everything, the art and the storytelling and the expressionism of it, and it just has this. It's just, and some of it is so funny. I mean, really, really funny.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
and
as
deeply
a guy
human.
was
Deeply human.
sorry.
Deeply human.
Yeah, too
Like
human. Yeah.
and not even just the spirit, but like A Contract with God or those other things that he had done.
Yeah.
Tenement stories or whatever. Like that's all.
Yeah. But I still think the spirit is, in a way. I mean, also because it's funny. I mean, it has. I mean, the later stuff he did is very serious-minded, but the spirit, some of the funny stuff in the spirit is really, really funny. I mean, there was a real, and I don't know. Maybe it was also that he had some. I mean, I don't know. He had some co-writers or whatever, but it's just there's just some stuff that's just really, really still. It just shines.
Yeah. And like it just sets up so many of the archetypes that we know and still follow to this day. You know, the mysterious villain, you never see his face. He's always in shadow. It's a new plot every week, you know, and all the cast of characters, the femme fatales, and it just kind of like boiled it down.
Women,
When Darwin Cook had kind of revitalized it for a while with DC, I was really it really reminded me some of the joy, you know, because you read the old books and take a lot of joy out of that. But seeing him sort of revisit that in kind of taking a modern, not really a modern spin on it, but kind of, you know, with his art style, which sort of really fit really well.
Yeah.
It was such beautiful work, and it was just it was. So
I think
cool.
also I think Dark Horse did a tribute series where they had various writers and artists come in and do just a single story, a single spirit story. Like I think they were even kept within the 8-page format or something like that. I can't remember how many issues came out, but it was like Alan Moore did one, and there was.
Oh wow!
I've never seen that collected anywhere. Maybe then DC bought the spirit rights, so maybe it's got buried in something illegal or whatever. But there was some interesting stuff in that too.
Wow, seeing Alan Moore visit that would be interesting because he has this way of like injecting this like real world human existential darkness into like even the most colorful of things.
And I think he did. He was trying to make some of the more, because the spirit. I mean, there was something in the spirit mythology that didn't really make sense, and he was trying to fix it, like come up with an explanation why all this fit together and all that stuff.
Yeah, that was my big. Well, I had a lot of complaints about the movie that Frank Miller made, but my biggest one was like they had to find some weird way to make it explain why they can take so much damage and keep living, and they basically make them like living cartoon characters, and it's like you don't need to do that.
That was that. I don't know. I think less said about that, the better. I think
that's true. And like you know, I'm not going to take away anything from Frank Miller, but no worries. But there's you know that I often when people ask me what's the worst movie I've ever seen, that one is pretty close to the top of the list. Well, that's very cool. So when like as you got older and discovered American comics and were drawing your own with your friends, like did you decide then your career was going to be you wanted to get into drawing comics?
No, I sort of drifted into I at some point I ended up going to art school, which was more like sort of I don't know. It was kind of weird. I mean, it was very uncharacteristic of me to do it, but I think it was because drawing was just taking up more and more of my time, and I think I figured that I might as well. This would be a way of doing it full time, at least when I went to the school. But I had no idea what you actually did when the school finished. But then I graduated from there, and then I started working as just a freelance artist doing commercial work, advertising and stuff like that. And and also I was working for some comic book because I was interested in comic books. I knew some people who were mostly people who were working on translating English American comics into Danish, and so I got to working with them, and I did various stuff for them. Like back then there was a lot of stuff that nowadays you just do on a computer that you actually do by hand. There was a lot of tasks like that, and I was actually making starting to make an okay living doing that. And then suddenly small jobs would come up that would actually involve doing comics, which I was always really happy to do, but it was more like, oh, that's nice, that was fun doing that. But then they sort of got bigger and more serious, and And then I went with another Danish artist. We went to the San Diego Comic Con in 1992, and then suddenly the jobs started coming in from the US, which was completely unforeseen, and then
Wow.
it sort of took off from there.
So you just went in with portfolio and handed out
Yeah,
stuff?
it was really really I think it was just a really lucky. I mean, it was really a good time to try to get into American comics. They were just really open to a lot of stuff, and they had, I guess maybe they'd run out of Britain's.
I was gonna say it seemed like they went really hard into like. Well, I talked with
Yeah,
Paul Levitz on the show here one time,
yeah,
and I think I was looking for some answer that I don't know if he understood, where I was trying to like figure out the magic, because there's like, as a comic fan, you're like, how did you know that all of this, all these English creators would come and build this crazy empire and do all this amazing work, and he's just sort of like, they just seemed like the best people at the time, and you're just
yeah,
sort of
yeah,
like.
yeah,
They seemed interesting. I didn't know they would be superstars. Their stuff seemed interesting enough to give them a shot, and it worked out, and it's so
yeah.
mundane, but it's true. But you're always looking for some magic reason or some ethereal thing that you'll never capture when it comes to recognizing creativity, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think it was just that there was so much happening in American comics that it was just all hands on deck, and they just needed to import some more labor. And then
Mm.
they went, when they had sucked dry Britain, they went and looking in other places.
Well, yeah, because like a lot of those people, especially for DC, and I really sort of romanticize and wish I was around in the comics world. I just do my own little thing here and there. Uh, when that was the thing, like when you could go to a place with a portfolio, it doesn't seem like that's quite as simple anymore. It's all online,
No,
and
no,
you
it
know,
wouldn't fly like that today. No,
yeah.
absolutely, yeah, yeah,
And speaking with older creators, who are not even old, but like creators that were around for that sort of time period, when they describe it, it just seems like they go meet some Titanic legend in the industry, looks at their book and says, "Okay, well maybe fix this, come back in a
yeah,
week, or send mail to me in a week, and I'll look over it." And it's just like it's yeah, it just seems like such a much, when it comes to creative stuff, a much more tactile way to sort of enter that
yeah,
industry.
yeah, yeah.
But
It was.
go ahead.
No, no, sorry, no, that was it.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it seems like, because a lot of those creators, like Europe, when they got all the European guys, or at least English people, they moved on to the rest of Europe. They all went to Vertigo, and it seems like you had quite a bit in that world as well when you sort of started out with them.
Yeah, yeah. I quickly ended up. I think I got the first. I think it was actually, maybe it was James Robinson who got me my first gig at Vertigo. But it quickly ended up being the place where I worked for the next many. I mean, I think most of the 90s, most of what I was doing was doing work for Vertigo. I mostly did I was sort of the the second artist on Books of Magic. They
Mhm.
had Peter Groves and Amaro, I think it was like the regular guys, and then I was like filling in whenever they were had needed a break or whatever. And then I did a lot of other fill-in issues with all kinds. I did a Dreaming miniseries with
Mhm.
Terry Laban as a writer, and those were good times. They were fun books, and they were all good writers to work with. I mean, I think that's another thing that I've really always been blessed with, just working with the best writers. That's really amazing looking back at it. I don't think I've ever done anything where I was like, oh my God, that guy's an idiot. I'm not going to work with him anymore.
Well, that's nothing you'd admit anyway. Well, that's true. In fact, I was quite interested when we made the connection to be able to do this, because I often I'm a massive Grant Morrison fan, and I like everything he's written. I read. I love everything, and I often tell people, like, don't sleep on the Animal Man that came after he left. Like, I love his
Mhm.
Animal Man, but like the Peter Milligan and the Jamie Delano stuff that came afterwards is also really interesting and really well worth your time.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and I saw you'd worked on one of those issues, which I thought was really, really cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I did. Yeah, I did one. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. Man, I almost forgot about that.
Well, like it's like we have these sort of mythic stories, or these collections that come out that are like, here's all of Alan Moore's run on Swamp Thing, or here's all of Morrison's run on Doom Patrol or something. But then, like, they kept, like, after they left those titles, and maybe they're the ones that brought them on the map, but other people came and did interesting things with them, and I feel like they get lost in the conversation sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I
but
think looking back at it, almost. I mean, I think all that Vertigo, I don't think they ever did anything that was all it did was interesting at the very least. I mean, and there was some really some fantastic books came out of that. Yeah.
Was there much of a like getting work on is it just a gig for you, or is like did you have a reverence for like when getting to work on like the Dreaming because of what was going on with
No, of course it was. I mean, it was always a big kick to get to work on those books. I mean, especially because it was like these. I mean, these were also the writers that I really admired. It was always a great. It was always great to get to work with these guys, but it was also because they were just fun books. I mean, they were good comics. It was you felt like you were doing something worthwhile. It wasn't just you weren't just churning it out, and you really tried to do your best because you wanted to do the stories proud. So it was a good period.
Yeah. Well, it's like just glancing at some of the stuff you worked on. It's quite a laundry list of like some innovative, interesting comics and creators at the time, like with Hellblazer and Books of Magic, Animal Man, The Dreaming. But yeah, it looks like you had quite a few issues on Starman in the second volume with.
Oh
with
yeah,
Robinson,
right. Then
so.
that was when Vertigo sort of. I don't know what actually happened. Maybe they were always a little in the. Anyway, Vertigo seemed to be sort of fading out. I mean, it never really. It took a long time before they actually closed down the imprint, but it just sort of. I don't know. Maybe it had something to do with Alan Moore leaving and Gaiman leaving, and maybe those had been more of a driving because they were like you still had really good. I mean, like Garth Ennis and all these guys that were really good writers, but they didn't have that world, that kind of cross series world building kind of universe building that the original writers had. So maybe that was what happened. I'm not really sure, but for some reason it just sort of petered out.
Yeah, and then, it's sort of interesting to me whenever you read those old books to see like Batman show up in Swamp Thing or like what I mean. Like, it seems
there was all that crazy stuff happening. Yeah, and just the way they were picking weird characters from the DC, not even things that weren't even thought of as being in the DC universe. They just went to the basement and found all these weird characters. And
Dr. Destiny showed up in Sandman and all that. It's just strange sort of stuff. I remember even in Morrison's Animal Man where they have like this world where all the forgotten DC characters live, like people that, and like I remember Mr. Freeze is one of them, and like this is before he sort of became, they reinvented him on the cartoon in the 90s and he became the Mr. Freeze we know today, when he was just almost the character that was on the old Adam West show where he's just sort of a ridiculous cold team villain, and you're like, oh, he was like a forgotten nobody, and that's in a world where and it's so funny seeing some of those characters sort of milling around in this weird forgotten world.
And I've never thought about this, but actually, Starman, as you mentioned, Starman was sort of although it wasn't a Vertigo book, it was very close to being what Vertigo was in the beginning, because it was basically James Robinson looking around and seeing if he could find some really embarrassing thing that DC had buried that he could dig up. Yeah.
But and make super cool. Like Starman was a super cool book.
It was great fun. That was also a really fun project. That was that was the first time, and I think up until now, actually, the only time I did a monthly book for any extended period of time, which is because I do both pencil and ink, so it's actually a lot of work. But that was a fun run. That was a good book, the Starman.
Did you find any like doing it that way, like inking your own work? Do you find it easier in a way because you don't have to, have someone else interpret your art in a way to do that, or is it like a time crunch thing, or?
It's I don't know. It's just never in Europe. It's never been a thing. I mean, it's always been that division of labor has always been a very American thing, and I guess I'm just not trained in that system, or whatever you would call it. And we actually tried with Starman. I had a very good inker on that, but it just didn't click. I mean, maybe it's just because in the end, I just had to admit that I'm actually not a very good penciler in the sense that Americans are used to having pencilers. I'm more of my pencils are more like layouts. They're not like that kind of thing where you have to totally guide people through everything. I just couldn't do it. It was not. It just I tried, and when I tried, it took me forever, and the result actually was less good than when I was doing it myself. Even if these guys were actually really good inkers, they were better than me, but still, it just didn't have that. It just didn't work. So I had to go back to doing it that way. Then I hired I hired some assistants to help with backgrounds and stuff like that. And that that was a way of trying to. I mean, but there was a couple of years where I was just working constantly. It was fun, but it was a hell of a lot of work.
Well, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way, but like I guess in the American comic system, do they like is there like a paycheck for inking, a paycheck for drawing, or is it just
Yeah,
you?
yeah. It's specifically.
Oh,
divided.
okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I assume that if you were like you just got whatever your rate is or whatever you negotiate your rate to be.
Yeah, I think nowadays they're getting more used to it being more like. I mean, it's not as, but back then it was definitely like two separate functions. You had a penciler, you had an inker, and they didn't necessarily meet or anything like that. It was just.
But if you did both, did you get paid more? Like, were you?
Yeah. Then I got
paid. Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah. Well, at least there's that. Yeah, right on. Well, like that was just such a cool book. Like it was that time period where they were really playing with the superhero genre and like doing more. Like I mean, obviously people come before him, but that one just seemed like it was like it seemed like when Moore was doing it or anyone else, it was sort of subverting the superhero genre in a way. And this one and Robinson's run really felt like he was living in it and playing with it. Like
he loved that stuff. Yeah, it was really infused with his love of that's what made it work. That he really, absolutely,
yeah. No, it was super cool. And you went on to do a little bit of work within the Hellboy universe too, which is must have been very exciting.
Yeah, that's been fun. I mean, I've always had an affinity for horror and monsters and stuff, so it was really fun getting to play with the BPRD universe. The whole that was a and working with John Arcudi, who's also a really smart writer, was also it was really a treat. It was we did some stuff that I'm still pretty proud of as well. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. You have I'm a big horror person too. What is the horror like film book industry look like in Denmark? Like what are the horror things
there's
that are
not much. There's just a new film that came out here. I haven't seen it yet. A Danish horror film that I'm gonna. But we don't have. I mean, again, since it's a small language area, we don't have we have few film people who do like specific genre films because it's just so narrow that it's hard for them to. So you can have somebody who does a horror film, but then it's not because there'll be a horror film director, and I guess you have to be. If you want to be really good at something, you have to sort of concentrate on that's the one thing you're doing. I mean, we had like a guy like Nicolas Refn, but he who did the action, the crime stuff, but then he went to Hollywood. I mean, and what happens then is, of course, if we get someone like that, he goes off to Hollywood, of course. He never comes back.
Well, like, actually, or they get some American remake that sort of, but like I always forget about Lars von Trier because it seems like he's sort of gone on to.
Oh yeah. That's him, of course. He did some stuff, I guess you could call horror. He did. Oh yeah, he did the Antichrist, which I never finished, I must admit.
It's a disturbing. I watched with a friend like a year or two ago. It's a disturbing movie. But like I mean, The House that Jack Built, which he did like a year or so ago, was an interesting.
That I've never seen. Yeah.
Well, that's but the one Speaking of Evil that came out like in 2022 is a Danish movie, which is a really cool.
That's the.
They just redid it with James McAvoy, like an English version. But
no, I haven't seen that either.
Well, there's some good stuff out there, Actually, one of my favorite movies I just saw this past year. It was in the film festival in Halifax, which is the capital of Nova Scotia. They had the film fest, and I saw a Danish movie called The Girl with the Needle.
I haven't seen that yet, but it should be really good.
I loved it. It was one of my favorite movies of the past year. It's talking about more. That's what I like about the sort of any of the Danish movies I've seen. I wouldn't say it's been a ton, but there's been it's not a simple answer. They'll give you a morally complex story that makes you have to sit and think about, where you stand on these issues, or actually do some introspection about what your opinion of this would be, or how you would deal with the situation. Like even was it Another Round? I think was the English title, but Drook, I think it was called in Danish. The one with oh God, Mads Mikkelsen. in it. He's
What
it's
did
like
what? Did,
I think it was called Another Round Over Here, but I think it was called Drook. It's like drunk or whatever in
oh yeah,
Danish.
oh that one. Yeah, I
Yeah.
had some. I mean, I have some philosophical issues with that one, but it's yeah, that was what's his name, Winterberg. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, I was
I think it was.
forgetting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know, like I find it very interesting looking at the films of other countries sometimes and just seeing what sort of culturally as sort of injected into their
Yeah, yeah,
stories
yeah. Of
or how they
course.
work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And of course, like Haxan, which is like a classic witch black and white
Hmm.
silent film,
Hmm.
which is Danish too. So yeah, some cool stuff out there. I mean, a lot of strange and weird fairy tales that come out of that world too. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, though we don't have that many actually using that. I've always wondered why that is. I've always thought there's some stuff to be mined from some of the from some of the folklore that that we've never had much in way of Danish folk horror. I've always
Hmm,
wondered why that is. I think somebody should sit down and do that. I think,
I agree.
yeah. Well, maybe interesting. Maybe sometime in the future when I'm retired and can think up some.
Well, I'm a huge fan of folk horror, so yeah, get on that. I'd love to see some of the. It's interesting just looking at like I got a book a little while ago that was like folklore and like ghost stories from different areas around the
Mhm,
world, and like so like they'll pick different ones from different countries
mhm.
and explain them all. And I'm just flipping through the book. I'm like, there are like just reading one page about one story. Like this is a whole novel or a horror movie. Like
Yeah,
someone should
yeah,
do
yeah,
like why
yeah.
isn't this a thing?
Mm,
Even where I'm at in Nova Scotia, near where I grew up, there was a famous ghost story about a house that was burned down, but kept like appearing like it was
mhm.
burning down and then burned down. And it's supposed to be every time they do some show about myths around the world or ghost stories, it shows up. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's interesting to see that on like kind of a shoot in with
Mm,
the world stuff. But yeah, like all like it just seems like that area is ripe for folk horror and stuff with all like the
yeah,
different
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
And
Mm.
not just like a troll movie or something, like Sweden does, but something else that's like, weird stuff in the woods and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and we have some. I mean, I guess maybe Denmark has always been about modernizing and sort of getting away from our um, poor peasant past. So maybe we just forgot
Yeah.
about it for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, even that's an interesting through line into that story,
Hmm.
trying to bury that sort of wild, more closer to nature sort of past behind this
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
to keep up with trends. Um, oh, that's very cool. Well, obviously, like you've continued on in your career and working with many creators and going back and work with Ennis for the Battlefields books for Dynamite and stuff like that must have been very interesting.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I've always enjoyed working with Garth. He's also a very good writer.
Yeah. And like just one of those guys that like it's funny because a lot of his stuff gets adapted into comics, or into movies and TV shows and stuff, but like he never seems part of that world. He always seems like still a comic book world
Yeah.
person.
Although The Boys, I think, worked really well as a TV series. That's one of the ones where it's really. I mean, I think they really made the transition well.
Yeah.
I haven't
Well,
seen the last season, but it's a pretty good series, I would
oh
say.
yeah. But it's still like it's wild. I wouldn't say wildly, but it's quite different from the book in many ways.
Yeah,
But
it is, but they still managed to preserve the spirit of it, I think.
yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and they have some wonderful actors, some really great stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really dug the same creators I believe did the Preacher show as well, which I actually thought was a very cool and interesting. Like they made it different enough that it's a fun journey. If you read the
Mhm.
books, you can enjoy the books for what they are, and then the show is changed things enough that the spirit's still there, but it's different. You're on a different kind
Yeah,
of path,
yeah,
which
yeah. I know
which I
what you
really
mean. Yeah,
yeah, it was quite good. And it was no surprise that like they went to the boys next, and then of course with superhero movies being what they are now, like
yeah,
literally
yeah, yeah.
to do something that subverts it is was pretty clever on their part to keep that rolling. But and like every time they do a Punisher adaptation, usually most of his Punisher stuff is what's featured in it.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's something to be said about that. Do you find like working with people that you worked with like decades ago in your career and then working with them again now, like do you feel like their style or their method of collaborating changes, or is it generally stay the same throughout the years? I guess Garth would
Well,
be an example, but
now now, of course, I'm working with Peter Tomasi on Hornsby and Halo, and there's a difference in that this is a monthly book. We haven't done that before together. Back then when we did, I mean, Pete was my editor on Starman, and so we have worked together in that sense. But as a writer, when we did stuff together, it was more like mini-series of limited projects. So there's that difference, of course. And also it's a very, like the stuff we did back then was very much dark and life and death and so on. So it's fun to do something. It's fun to see him flex his funny bone muscles. I mean, the Hornsby and Halo is a really fun book, and it's so that's different. It's a different side. I mean, I knew he had it in him, of course, because he's done that stuff for DC, but it's just fun to see him develop the characters and play with them. It's a lot of fun. I'm really, really enjoying working on that.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, what that was my next question, was what's sort of next in the hopper for you that you can talk about that's coming down the pipeline, or what stuff you're working on currently?
Yeah, but that's the Hornsby and Halo. That's all I mean, since it's again, I'm back doing a monthly book, which I never would have thought would happen, but now it's happening, and and so far we're doing okay. We have a couple of we'll have a fill-in issue at a point because we need. I mean, I need to catch up a bit, but it's actually going surprisingly well. Maybe also a little bit because of technology, because the digital process shaves off a few minutes each day, which just makes it a little more realistic to do it. But it's and it's a great book. I'm really enjoying working it. I'm really proud of what we're doing with it, and it's great being a part of the Ghost Machine team. They're just it's an amazing collection of guys they've got there. It's really like I don't think I've never quite been involved in anything quite like that. I mean, maybe in the Vertigo days, in a lot of ways, it feels like that again. It's and who would ever have thought we were going to do that again? That's pretty amazing.
That's awesome. Are you, speaking of like keeping up with modern technology, are you onto the digital? Like, do you do your work digitally?
Yeah, I'm working on a Cintiq now. Yeah.
Nice.
So there's some, I mean, just the not having to wait for ink to dry and stuff like that. It's just it's the same process. I basically work the same way I would. The only difference is I don't spill ink and I don't have to wait for it to dry. But otherwise, it's very much the same process as it was before.
Yeah, I tell you, spilling ink was the worst. Like I remember when you were younger and you kind of like. Now the technology's caught up. I'm very happy because it's nice to, hold your iPad and sit on your front deck and draw a page.
Yeah.
But instead of like, I remember when I was younger being very much like, I gotta do what the masters did and do what they did before me and pull out the flange pens and try to ink that way and then just ruin so many pages where they would just pool on the page and get.
Yeah.
So, it seems like I don't want to like, say that there's no value in the traditional methods. Of course there is, but
no, there is. I mean, I really miss. I mean, first and foremost, I miss. I mean, of course, I miss the original art. I mean, I miss having the physical object, and there was something about the process. I mean, sometimes I play with the idea of doing an actual physical book simply because it would be fun to do it, but the problem is in the end when there are deadlines and stuff, you always have revert to what is the safest and fastest way of doing it.
Yeah.
So maybe at some point some. But then again, I also really there's something about the digital process that I enjoy now that I've been working on it. You get to tweak your brushes and stuff like that, and there's some things that are just really cool that would be. I mean. You can recreate most of that, of course, in analog ink.
Yeah.
But it's still, I don't know. Maybe one day.
I'm a sucker. I get lots of ads ever since I got like the iPad Pro and I use Procreate, but there's lots of other ones. And all these sort of, these ads you get on social media and stuff for the different brush packs you can get now with all these like make it look retro and make it look with the dots and all that stuff. And it's like,
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to undermine anybody's business, but it's that. I mean, in my experience, go and play with it yourself. Figure out what they can do and experiment with it because it's part of the fun is to will get better results when you understand how these things work behind the curtain.
That's awesome. Well, I know you got to get going, so I'll have to let you go. But I just wanted to say thanks for being on the show, and I look forward to reading the Danish folk horror book to come. So,
and remember to if you haven't, and you know the audience, of course, check out Hornsby and Halo, because it's really, really a good book.
Awesome. I'll definitely share some links about your work on that as well. So
yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Well,
Thanks
thank you,
a lot.
Peter, and have a great day.
You're welcome. Yeah, I will. Good night.
There you have it, my conversation with Peter Snejbjerg, a really cool chat with a really cool creator. As I mentioned at the top of the show, the Oscars, Peter and I do talk about the movie The Girl with the Needle, which was nominated for Best International Film this year. Didn't win, but it deserved to. It is a dark and morally complex tale that I would highly suggest. Not for the faint of heart, but if you like your movies dark sometimes, this is the one for you. It's deeply human, very disturbing, and a beautiful piece of work. So if you're watching movies, don't exclude Denmark from your movie watching list. They make some really cool, very interesting movies, and The Girl with the Needle is one of the best ones I've seen recently. So be sure to go check that out. And as Peter mentioned several times in the interview, he's currently working on Hornsby and Halo right now, which is a very cool project that is out there and making some waves and seems to be doing quite successfully. So let's keep that ball rolling, go out and support that book and support other work by Peter. He is out there waving the artistic flag, and I'm here for every minute of it. It's awesome. So thanks, Peter, for being on the show. Thank you for listening. Be sure to tune in next week for another fun-filled, action-packed show. But in the meantime, stay safe, have fun, read some comics, and read some Hornsby and Halo comics. Just go do it. Just read them. What are you waiting for? Turn this off. Go grab them. Grab them now. Catch you next time. The Graphic Histories Podcast is a proud partner of the United Federation of Podcasts.